Buenas tardes, chicos. Soy señorita Clark. Hoy vamos a estudiar las expresiones con el infinitivo del capítulo 4. Vamos a estudiar el verbo o la expresión tener que, ir a y también acabar de. Primero, es muy importante entender qué es el infinitivo. Un ejemplo de un infinitivo es el verbo estudiar. El verbo estudiar termina en AR. Un ejemplo de este verbo conjugado es estudio. Yo estudio. ¿Qué significa estudiar, el infinitivo? ¿Qué significa en inglés? Correcto, estudiar significa to study. Y yo estudio en inglés, ¿qué significa? Exacto, en inglés yo estudio significa I study. Es la forma conjugada. Otro ejemplo es el verbo comer, que termina en ER. Comer, ¿qué significa en inglés? Comer significa to eat. Un ejemplo de este verbo conjugado sería ellos comen. ¿Qué significa? Si has dicho they eat, tienes razón. El último ejemplo, el verbo escribir, que termina en IR. ¿Qué significa escribir? To write. Y la forma conjugada, un ejemplo podría ser nosotros escribimos. ¿Y qué significa nosotros escribimos? Correcto, we write. Entonces, el infinitivo siempre termina en AR, ER o IR. Y en inglés, el infinitivo siempre tiene to. To study, to eat, to write. Those are all the infinitive forms in English. Ok, chicos, ahora vamos a repasar un verbo que ya sabemos conjugar, que es el verbo tener. Y sabemos que el verbo tener significa to have. Vamos a practicar las conjugaciones juntos. Tengo, tienes, tiene. Tenemos, tenéis, tienen. We already know how to conjugate this verb and what this verb means, but what's important to notice today is that we have a new word accompanying the verb tener, which is que, tener que, which means to have to. Let's see if you remember what we just reviewed in the last frame. What does tener que mean in English? Muy bien, tener que significa to have to. Now remember, tener que must be followed by an infinitive when you want to talk about something someone has to do. For example, if you would like to say you have to study a lot, you could say tú tienes que estudiar mucho. If you notice, only the first verb, which in this sentence is tener, is conjugated. Tú tienes que. Estudiar is not conjugated. That form stays in the infinitive. Tener que, conjugate the tener form, but leave the second form in the infinitive. Let's look at another example. The second example on this page is él tiene que repasar la lección. Él tiene. Notice that is the conjugated form of the verb. He has to. Él tiene que repasar la lección. Repasar is in the infinitive form. Tener is the verb that we conjugate. Now let's look at another verb that we are at least somewhat familiar with, the verb ir, which means to go. Let's practice the conjugated forms. Voy, vas, va. Vamos, vais, van. While we know that ir means to go, something new to learn is that ir a means to be going to. Again, a little memory test. Do you remember what ir a means in English? To be going to. So ir a works similarly to the last verb expression we just practiced, tener que. With ir a, it is also followed by the infinitive. Let's take a look at this. Yo voy a hacer la tarea. What do you think this sentence means? It means I am going to do the homework. Yo voy, I go. But we can conjugate this as I am going to. I am going to do hacer la tarea, the homework. Let's try it with another form of the verb ir. Conjugate it with ellos. Ellos van a leer un libro. Notice that the same thing happens as it did with our previous verb. We only conjugate the first verb, which in this case is ir. The second verb that comes after always stays in the infinitive. Same in the second example. We conjugate the first verb, but the second stays in the infinitive. Ir a plus the infinitive. Now you guys are pros. This is the same format we followed for the last two verb expressions, except we do have a new verb, acabar. Acabar in inglés significa to finish. Acabo, acabas, acaba. Acabamos, acabáis, acaban. The tricky part here is that when we add the word de, acabar de means to have just. So in a sense, you could think to have just finished something, right? Acabar de, to have just. Let's see again if you remember. What does acabar de mean in English? If you said to have just, you were listening very closely. Again, we follow the same rules. Acabar de will be followed by the infinitive form of a verb. So if you wanted to say, she has just run, you could say, ella acaba de correr. How about saying, you all have just entered class? Vosotros acabáis de entrar en clase. Remember, just as before, we only conjugate the first verb, which in this case is acabar. Ella acaba. We do not conjugate the second verb, correr. It remains in the infinitive. Same below. Vosotros acabáis. Conjugated. And the following verb, whatever you have just Done, enter. Entrar remains in the infinitivo. Maravilloso, chicos. Habéis hecho un gran trabajo. Ahora, completa los ejercicios en TigerWeb para practicar las expresiones con el infinitivo. Buena suerte. Hasta luego.